I work at a haunted gas station in New Hampshire. The dark rules they never told me. I never should have opened that door. It felt wrong, like a red flag flaring in my gut. And yet, there I was, standing behind the counter at that gas station, where the air was always thick with an eerie chill. The lights flickered overhead, as if the universe was warning me to turn back. Every corner of the room was wrapped in shadow, and I could swear I felt eyes watching me from them. It was just another Tuesday evening. I had my headphones in, a half-cold cup of coffee sitting next to the register, when the whispers started. Faint at first, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks. I had become accustomed to the oddities of the place: the flickering neon sign outside that buzzed like a hornet, the persistent smell of gasoline that somehow blended with something sweet and rotten. But then the door creaked open. The bell chimed, not in its usual cheerful way, but with an echo, almost mournful. A chill darted down my spine. A customer? I glanced up. No one stood there. Just darkness. I squinted, thinking my eyes must be deceiving me, and returned my attention to the screen of my phone. But the silence was unsettling. Cracks, pops, and hushed voices crept through the aisles. Was it the old soda machine? Had the ancient freezer decided to surrender after all these years? I stood and peered down the aisle of dusty snacks, gripping the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. The hairs on my neck stood tall, prickling with fear. I took a deep breath. Hello. My voice broke the stillness, but it only made the whispers escalate into hushed giggles, swirling around me, bouncing off the walls like playful spirits. I scanned the area again. The store flickered in an unholy dance of light and shadow. It was just me, right? Alone in this haunted hellhole of a gas station. And then, I saw it. A shadow moved, swift and silent, slipping between the aisles. My heart raced. Fear gripped my chest like a vice. I took a tentative step forward, the floor creaking under my weight. Silence fell. Waiting. I felt the weight of the darkness pressing against my skin. Was it just my imagination? I needed to convince myself. I called out again, firmer this time, "Is anyone there?" The shadows remained still, but I could still hear breathing, heavy, ragged, like something lying in wait. I stepped back, my head spinning. The overhead lights flickered again, plunging the store into deeper darkness. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. My mind raced with the stories I had heard about the place, the spirits that roamed the aisles, the customers who never left. My gut twisted. This was more than just rumors. Something was watching me. A loud bang jolted me, and I nearly screamed. A jar of candy flew off a shelf, crashing to the floor. I rushed to collect myself, heart pounding. I had to get out of there. I turned to run, but the door I entered through slammed shut with a deafening thud, trapping me inside. I was not alone anymore. The darkness shifted once more, and a figure emerged from the gloom, its face obscured. It took a step closer, and my breath caught in my throat. I froze, my blood turning to ice. This was no customer, this was something far worse. "Help," whispered the figure, its voice chilling me to the bone. In that moment, all the stories crashed into reality, and I realized I was in a nightmare from which I might never wake. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure took another step forward, drawing into a dim glow from the flickering fluorescent lights above. My stomach twisted, clenching in terror as I finally discerned its features: eyes sunken deep into its skull, dark and liquid-like, with skin stretched taut over bony cheeks, the shadow of a once-living face. A ghostly hand, pale and trembling, reached out toward me, almost in desperation. "Help!" The figure rasped again, now closer, its breath a rancid, earthy mix that filled the air with a sickening stench. I felt bile rise in my throat as I stumbled backward, hitting the corner of the counter hard enough to cause a sharp pain. The shadow's thin lips twisted into what could only be called a grotesque smile, a sharp contrast to the deep hollowness that surrounded it. The whispers swirled around me, rising and falling like a dark melody, luring me in. Words mingled with the sounds, soft and teasing. "Stay. Stay with us." My heart hammered in response, a raw fear that pulsed with every frantic beat. I had always thought of horror stories as mere entertainment, a chilling diversion, but standing here, faced with something not of this world, I understood their dread. This was a horror that seeped into the bones that I took a shaky step back, the light flickering again, more violent this time. The shadows danced around us with reckless abandon, as if they themselves had come alive. I can't help you," I stammered, my voice cracking under the weight of fear. You're not real." A distant laughter echoed in the periphery, an unsettling chorus of 1,000 forgotten souls. The figure's expression soured, transforming from desperate to something darker, predatory. "Not real?" It echoed mockingly, the words dripping with malice. "We are all too real, trapped in a limbo of our own despair. You can join us. Become one of us." It's so easy. Sudden panic washed over me, igniting instincts buried deep within. I darted around the counter and sprinted toward the door, but it remained stubbornly shut, resolutely refusing to budge. I banged on it with both fists, desperation clawing through my thoughts. "Let me out. Let me out." My pleas echoed in the hollow space, banished by the shadows but carried just as quickly by the whispers, now rising like a rising tide. Just as I felt my strength waning, the lights flickered one last time before plunging the gas station into darkness. The cold wrapped around me, pulling at my spirit like the beckoning of some malevolent force. My breath turned shallow as a rasping voice broke through the void. "Where do you think you're going?" The figure asked, its voice now multi-layered, morphing into a cacophony of the tormented souls around me. My back hit the door, an oppressive weight looming over me. I fumbled for my phone, praying for light, for hope. But the battery was dead, extinguishing any flicker of reassurance, rather plunging me deeper into despair. Then, suddenly, the whispers turned frantic, an urgent clamor as they spiraled around me like a vortex. "Run! Run!" They cried, but before I could process, I felt fingers grasp at my ankles, cold and strong, yanking me down to the floor. I twisted, trying to kick free, but the grip was relentless, pulling me toward the darkness that beckoned, deeper into a void I did not understand. With all my might, I clawed at the tiles, my nails scraping as I screamed. "Please!" It sounded weak even to my ears, a plea that faded into nothing as I was dragged closer to the edge of the abyss. I could see shapes emerging from the blackness, writhing forms that writhed as if in some sort of grotesque ecstasy. Their hollow eyes fixed on me, speaking of eternal pain and fear. Just as I felt the coldness threatening to encapsulate me, I managed to scramble upright, lunging for the nearest shelf. The gas station shook with furious energy as bottles clattered to the ground, spraying glass and soda everywhere. The darkness faltered for a moment, a brief respite. Desperation fueled my legs as I finally hurled myself at the glass door, shoulders slamming against its surface. An agonizing crack reverberated through the air, but it held under my weight. "No! No!" The voices begged, a chorus weaving together a tapestry of dread. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted, a quake that stole my balance. My feet stumbled, I could no longer distinguish between the floor and the icy tendrils of night. And in that moment, everything fell silent, too quiet, like nature holding its breath in anticipation. Then, from the depths of the shadows, the figure glided toward me, sharper and more defined. "You cannot escape," it hissed, its hand outstretched, this time reaching for my heart. It paused, just for a moment. "But you will learn," it whispered. My scream tore through the stillness as the surrounding darkness melted away, and in that blinding instant, I fell. The world tipped, and I was plunged into oblivion. I landed not on the floor but inside the shadows, consumed by them, surrounded by the angry spirits howling for release. Panic ensued. I was not merely trapped, I was swallowed by the reality I once feared most. And just as I began to despair, I heard a voice strong and clear. "You wanted to know the truth?" It said, as if mocking my earlier curiosity. "Welcome to your nightmare that I had become part of the haunted, bound to a tale far beyond my understanding," and suddenly, the whispers ceased, replaced by a palpable silence. The door of escape, was it really there or just an illusion? And my lurking shadow watched, curious and hungry. Somewhere, in the churning void, I felt a familiar grip on my wrist. I turned, and gasped. There, staring back at me with those hollow, dark eyes, was my own Iona, ghost of who I had once been. The silence wrapped around me, pressing down like a thick fog, suffocating every thought. I stared into the face of my reflection, my spectral twin hovering in the void. Its mouth opened and closed, trying to form words that no longer belonged to me. A sense of inevitability rushed over me, an understanding that my fate had been sealed the moment I stepped through that door, but the flicker of hope still burned deep within my chest. I wanted to believe there was a way out, that the light could pierce the darkness, but that belief began to flicker. "To join us," my reflection whispered, and I felt its breath on my face, a frigid gust that sent tremors through my body. "This place feeds on souls like ours. You'll never be alone again, we will be one with the shadows." With every second I stayed in this realm, the boundary between my own identity and that of the tormented souls around me blurred. I fought against the pull of their collective despair, trying to wrench myself free from their grasp, but the darkness was hungry. It clawed at my mind, igniting shadows from my past, me fears, my insecurities, each memory a flickering light obliterated by the suffocating shroud of the void, and then, as if sensing my struggle, the shadows coalesced, swirling violently until a wall of faces emerged, their expressions of anguish and fury fixed in eternal torment. They slammed against an invisible barrier that separated us, only to melt back into the shroud of darkness, only to rise again and again, revealing the horrific truth that lay behind the false safety of the gas station. "Who were you before?" A voice, deep and resonant, cut through the air, echoing from more than one source, the depths of despair combining into a singular cacophony. "What do you wish to forget?" The voices blended, each inflection holding a sliver of my own memories, of lost opportunities, broken dreams, and the unbearable weight of regret. "Stop!" I cried out, slamming my hands to my head as if physical force could shield me from the nonsense of my own past being laid bare. The shadows danced in response, and I felt their amusement, undulating like waves hungry to crash over my resolve. "Let go," the voices urged in unison, the whispers turning sweet, like promises filled with deception. "You don't belong in the world above anymore. You belong with us." Desperate, I shunned their calling. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and raced deeper into the embracing dark. The air vibrated with the soul's rage, their moans rising to a crescendo, booming with every step I took. I stumbled over unseen obstacles, hearty laughter echoing through the obsidian expanse, as if the void itself jeered, mocking my defiance against the inevitable. As I dashed deeper, I spotted a lantern glimmering ahead, the flicker drawing me close like a moth to flame, a sign of hope or a trap. Every instinct screamed for me to keep going, to reach that light and the semblance of safety it promised. Pushing through waves of despair, I reached for it, lunging forward only to feel the cold grasp of the tendrils holding me back. Suddenly, the exhilaration that had propelled me forward halted. The light flickered and expanded until it formed a doorway, a threshold leading not into safety but into a horrifying realization. The faces I had seen in the shadows, the souls I had yearned to escape, this doorway led directly into their world, where torment reigned unchecked. I hesitated. Go through. Their voices urged, a frantic push like they were dying to pull me back. "You'll find what you lost, the life you left behind. You belong here." Just as the darkened space shuddered around me, twisting like a serpent, I felt the fingers that held me tighten. Fear gripped me once more as I cast a glance back toward the door I once longed to escape. There stood my reflection, regaining its corporeal form, cracking its wretched smile. "Flee all you want," it said. "You'll never escape what's within you. You'll always be drawn to darkness. Join your kind." With that, the veil of shadows shifted violently, and I understood, I was trapped not by my surroundings, but by the very essence of who I was, what I had become. I looked back to the door, the light flickering tantalizingly, before the dark enveloped me. Then came a snap, a jarring sound that sliced through the Hosea character I could not see was descending upon me, a profound force that sent the shadows writhing in panic. Was it friend or foe? My heart raced as I spun back to the door, my throat tightening further. "Do you want out?" The unseen presence whispered, a voice that resonated like thunder but filled with compassion. "Then make a choice," and just then, the light behind me went out. I felt the pull of the dark world intensifying, its grasp clamoring for my surrender, urging me to heed its call. One final moment stretched into eternity, an endless abyss waiting to swallow me whole, as I prepared to make the choice that would seal my fate, and in that stillness, with memories flooding my mind, a scream echoed the anguished cry of a soul that had once been alive. My heart stopped. Somewhere in the shadows, a figure flickered to life, silhouetted against the encroaching darkness, its hollow eyes locked on mine with a promise of wrath and despair. "Choose wisely." The darkness writhed around me, tendrils snaking close enough to wrap around my wrists, cold and unyielding, whispering sweetly of surrender. As I grappled with the arrival of the ominous silhouette, my pulse quickened. The figure stepped forward, its form shifting and undulating like smog, eyes glinting like shards of broken glass caught in moonlight, a reflection of despair's visage, yet distinctly human. "Are you afraid?" it asked, voice echoing with a sincerity too deep to ignore. "You don't need to suffer. All it takes is the right choice." The shadows around the figure twisted more violently, shouting their contempt, but it loomed unbothered, its presence both alluring and repellent. Each heartbeat filled me with dread as I realized I was standing on that fragile edge between light and dark, sanity and madness. "What do you want?" I managed to ask, desperately fighting the urge to yield. "That I want what you want," it murmured, tilting its head as if pondering my soul's worth. "Freedom from the burden of existence here, that weight becomes a reflection in our unity. Join us, and the pain becomes a memory, a fleeting thought." How could you not see the beauty? What beauty? An unmistakable scar, one I had etched into flesh long ago, each jagged line a painful memory I had sworn not to forget. And then in that terrible moment, the shadows crumbled away, unraveling in chaos, while the figure's thin smile twisted into a snarl. "Time's up." It bellowed, and the void compressed around me as I was ripped from the precipice of decision. I could feel the air shift, fabric separating as the crack widened further, exposing a blinding flash of white light that surged like an avalanche toward me. Within that heartbeat before impact, clarity pierced through the chaos, revealing the twisted truth, the grim reminder of the choice looming closer than ever. "Don't!" The scream shattered my thoughts as I was engulfed, plummeting down a chasm into an inescapable fate. Then I fell, and silence swallowed me whole. Something was waiting. The air throbbed with a tension that chilled my bones as the weight of silence settled around me in an oppressive blanket. It took a moment for my senses to unfurl from the cacophony of fear, an eternal moment that felt as if it was stretching into eons. I blinked against the blinding light and managed to regain my footing in the chill of dank concrete. I stood in an abandoned gas station, the kind of place one might drive by without a second glance. The flickering neon sign out front, the letters spelling out "Open," now burned with an unsettling ferocity long had lost its allure. The glass doors were cracked, as jagged as my psyche felt. It was eerily pristine inside, devoid of the dust and decay that should accompany years of neglect, but an undercurrent of disarray lingered in the corners, just beyond the fringe of my perception. "Where am I?" The whispered question echoed off the empty walls, and my own voice sent shivers down my spine, as if I were merely an intruder in a sanctum of lost souls. The humming fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, mimicking the disquiet within me, as I forced myself forward through aisles of goods stacked like tombstones. Gum wrappers lay strewn across the floor, and the chilled air bore a faint sweetness, the scent of something both wonderful and rotting. A broken clock on the wall ticked slowly, as though it delighted in hitting each second with relentless precision, counter to the stillness choking the atmosphere around me. As the chill deepened, a laugh began to reverberate, soft and sinister, a giggling like that of children playing hide-and-seek at the edge of a forest, but tainted with something darker. Every hair on my body stood on end as the sound grew closer, drawing closer like a long-lost friend whispering secrets meant only for my ears. "No, no," I implored, heart hammering as I forced myself to move further into the gas station, past barren soda fridges and dusty displays. The laughter sharpened, doubling back on itself, filling every crevice and curling around my consciousness. With every step, the air felt heavier, weighed down by unseen eyes that watched with hungry anticipation. "Help me," a voice cried, suddenly drawing me savagely from my paralyzed state. It was echoing from the restroom at the far end, the door cracked just slightly ajar. I approached slowly, trepidation coursing through my veins as I reached for the doorknob. It was cold against my palm, almost as if it were a pulse, anticipating the horror to come. "Please, I need help," the voice pleaded, desperation clinging like fog. "I'm trapped," I paused, fear twisting like a vine around my thoughts. Could I dare to open that door? Who was begging from the other side? Dread coiled tighter in my chest, but empathy forced my hand to turn the knob. With a creak that echoed through the emptiness, I stepped inside. The bathroom was a nightmare frozen in time, with cracked tiles and peeling paint. A low, cracked mirror loomed above the sink, and I felt my reflection ripple in its glass surface, something just beyond my comprehension lurking behind my own features, an echo of loneliness, fear, and darkness. "Please." The voice erupted again, strained and frightened, its owner lost behind the bathroom stall's stained partition. My heart raced dangerously as I approached, and with a swift push, I nudged the door open, revealing a horror beyond belief. There was no one inside. The stall was empty, but the air felt heavy as if it had been filled with unfulfilled cries and despair. From the corners, the shadows began to condense, swirling and tightening into a shape too formless to define. The echoes of laughter crescendoed, morphing into mournful wails that ricocheted inside my skull. I stumbled back, horror flooding my senses, mind scrambling as I caught sight of something trembling in the corner. A figure appeared, draped in shadow, clutching a tattered doll whose glassy eyes stared blankly ahead. Its lip trembled as it raised its head toward me, the mask of a child twisted grotesquely. "Save me," it whispered, voice breaking like the fraying thread of a nightmare. "I want to go home." My own words felt foreign and hollow, slipping from my lips like promises made to the void. Where is home? Behind the shadows. With utter dread, I glanced back at the stall, and what little courage I had dwindled as the shadows conspired around me, swirling with a will of their own, creeping closer, their whispers a cacophonous dirge. "Don't let them take you." The figure cried as the shadows lunged for me, their collective weight hungry for my soul. With no time left to think, I shattered the glass mirror with my fist. Shards of silver glinted as they scattered, and I dove into the gaping maw of that jagged fracture, praying it would lead me to safety. But as I entered, darkness enveloped me once more, the walls closing in, the cacophony rising in pitch and terror, and I understood that whatever lay on the other side would not release me easily. And then there it was, an icy whisper brushing against my ear, chilling me to the core. "You can run," it breathed, "but you'll never escape." The darkness swallowed my scream whole. Something sharp pierced through the void, a cold needle of light that drew me from an abyss of nothingness. I gasped, a desperate breath bursting forth as I found myself sprawled on the floor of a room that felt more prison than sanctuary. My vision swam, blinking away the remnants of the darkness, falling on an unsettling scene that I lay in a dim storage area, boxed in and stank of mildew intertwined with decaying pine. The space was filled with shelves upon shelves of antiquated items, dusty tools, rusted machinery, and forgotten relics from a day long gone. Grainy photographs hung crookedly on the walls, faces caught in time, their gazes filled with an unnerving sorrow. Their eyes seemed to track my movements, alive in their silence, heart racing. I scrambled to my feet, the nauseating weight of dread settling back onto my shoulders. Something shifted in the corner of the room, catching my attention. An old radio sat atop a crate, its surface dulled by neglect, yet the dials were still intact, almost calling to me. Before I realized what I was doing, I was drawn to it. I flicked the switch, and the static burst forth like a beast unleashed, crackling and howling, before coalescing into a somber tune that echoed through the cramped space an eerie lullaby that felt both ancient and hauntingly familiar. What is this place? I muttered, glancing nervously around as if the walls might answer me. The radio didn't seem to care about my questions. It continued to play, scratchy notes dripping like shadows from the speakers, whispering secrets of a time long buried. The room began to tremble. A low rumble resonated beneath me, pulsing like a heartbeat. Images flickered through my mind, hazy visions of mothers searching for their lost children, fathers shrouded in grief, tragedy woven into the fabric of everyday lives. Gripping the edge of the crate for support, I felt as if the shadows were crawling up my legs, pulling me back into cold oblivion. Suddenly, the music stopped, and a low voice crackled through the silence, eerily intimate. They're all lost like you. That I froze, the words writhing like serpents in my mind. What do you want from me? The radio distorted, laughter blooming twisted and garish. It warped, bending the air around me, raising the hairs on my neck. To find them you must join them. The chilling proclamation sent a shudder through my body, and before I could process my terror, the room began to undulate. The shelves rattled violently, tools clattering to the floor as if the very existence of the gas station was rebelling against me. A wave of freezing air washed over me, and a flicker of movement caught my eye that I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The shadows swelled, merging and spiraling into a figure that took shape before me, a woman with hollow eyes and sunken cheeks, lips curled into a mournful song. Help me, save us. My heart pounded, flooded with the urgency to flee. She extended a skeletal arm, fingers elongated in a grasping gesture. You must listen. Why? I gasped, stumbling backward, breath hitching as I felt the edges of my sanity fraying. What can I do? Find the key, she rasped, her voice echoing against the walls. The key to the door. What door? Before she could answer, the room trembled again. The shadows pulled back, retreating momentarily. But I knew they would return, hungry. With a wild desperation, I sprinted across the storage area, my breath a hoarse gasp against the growing noisy, a dissonant symphony of whispers, pleas for salvation clawing at my ears. That I burst through the far door, spilling out into the gas station's dimly lit shop, the flickering neon casting ghostly shadows. But something was different. The space had morphed. The aisles loomed like sentinels, warped and disfigured, conspiring against me. The once familiar aisles of snacks and drinks had become an entangled labyrinth, and there it was, in the center of the story, a massive door, unlike anything I'd seen. It was crudely constructed from rough-hewn wood, heavy and forbidding, adorned with chains that glimmered unnaturally in the neon glow. A chill gripped my throat as I approached, my heart drumming in my ears. Something slammed against the door from the other side, unseen but palpable. The whispers crescendoed, laughter and cries merging into an agonizing chorus urging me to flee. I forced myself to reach for the door's iron handle, but a voice soft, lilting like a forgotten tune stopped me cold. Choose wisely. The door leads to dreams or nightmares, but you cannot remain here forever. I hesitated, intuition screaming at me to turn back, as shadows pooled around my feet, whispers weaving a web of dread enveloping me in their sinister embrace. Then, just as a freezing breath swept down my spine, the door twisted itself open with a screech like nails across a chalkboard, darkness spilling out. With a surge of panic, I was snatched into the yawning abyss, the door slamming shut behind me with a finality that resounded in the empty space. The shadows surged and swallowed my scream, and it dawned on me this eternal night. The worst horrors were those that awaited beyond the door, and the echoes of my choice would soon haunt me in ways I could never imagine. The darkness engulfed me, thick, heavy, suffocating. I stumbled forward, unable to see if I was walking on solid ground or an endless void. My heart raced, a relentless drumbeat of dread, each pulse echoing like a death knell. The air shimmered with unseen barriers, weaving tightly around my limbs as if trying to restrain me, constricting my thoughts, wrapping me in a cocoon of silent terror. As I pushed through the inky blackness, whispers crawled along the edges of my consciousness, me name carried on the voices, sweet yet sinister. They spoke intimately, weaving tales of loss and betrayal while threading strands of my own fears into their fabric. Shadows flickered, skimming past my consciousness, too quick to catch but painfully familiar, like glimpses of my own fleeting memories. Help us, they begged, blending into a cacophony of sorrow that seeped into the marrow of my bones. Please save us. Save who? I screamed, my voice split by panic, but my question echoed into nothingness. The air turned brittle around me, the temperature plummeting till my breath formed clouds of vapor, swirling grotesquely as if attempting to convey anguish of its own. Then a soft light emerged. At first, it felt warm against the chill, like the first rays of dawn breaking through a cold night. Hope ignited within me, and in that moment, I rushed toward the source, desperate for salvation, for clarity. But as I approached, I realized it was not light. Instead, it was a distorted figure floating above a cracked mirror, shimmering fragments reflecting twisted versions of myself. Around me, the whispers grew in intensity, a rising anthem of despair. You are one of us, they chanted, their voices melding into a trance, compelling me closer toward the mirror that rippled with dark energy. I dared a glance at the reflections, and what I saw sent a sledgehammer of dread through my gut. Each visage was a version of me twisted and contorted in fear and grief, a younger self weeping, a future me staring blankly, void of hope, while yet another bore the twisted remnants of anguish. No! I gasped, recoiling as I covered my face, but it was too late. The visions crashed into me like waves, their morbid beauty too overwhelming to resist. Join us, become whole, they whispered, a chorus woven from my deepest fears, beckoning me into their embrace. I felt the urge to yield, to submit to the horror that promised to free me from the tangled webs of reality. Perhaps this was the way out, a release from the torment I felt so deeply in this desolate gas station. Suddenly, the mirror began to crack, splintering as the figures reached through the shards, clawing for me. Help us! Their voices coalesced into a singular terrifying chorus, a haunting cry that echoed through the fabric of this nightmare. I stumbled back as darkness spilled through the broken reflections, surging toward me, an eager beast tasting my fear. I turned and ran instinctively, but there seemed to be no end to the cold, endless darkness. With each step, the whispers turned into shrieks, a cacophony of sorrowful warnings, while shadowy hands grasped at my heels, pulling me back into the fatal embrace of the darkness. Then, just as I was about to lose all hope, I stumbled upon a staircase spiraling downward, its edges crumbling into the void. The shadows writhed around it, hesitant, as if afraid of what lay beneath. A single instinct pulled me downwards. I flung myself, plunging into the unknown, crashing down the steps. The air grew heavier with each descent, thickening, forming what felt like solid walls pressing closer. Footsteps echoed behind me, slow, deliberate, inexorable. The whispers rose again, twisting into taunts as I gained speed, drawing closer, a hunt underway. I dared not look back, fearing what giver of the shadows had been unleashed behind me. Finally, I crashed onto the bottom floor, sprawling across a damp, stone surface. The walls around me barely glowed, inscribed with illegible symbols, each pulsing with a sinister heartbeat. I pushed myself up, a scream lodged in my throat as I scanned my surroundings. Desperate for a sign of escape, the air was charged with electricity, forming thick currents of horror. I froze in place as a large iron door loomed menacingly before me, adorned with spectral carvings of faces writhing in eternal agony. They seemed aware, writhing in anguish under my gaze, and I could no longer distinguish them from the whispers swirling around me. Then, the door creaked open, just a crack, and an unbearable pull emanated from within, as if it contained all the lost souls screaming for release. A voice, low and raspy, slithered through the widening gap, beckoning me closer. You've come to seek the truth or your end. Your choice will alter the course. Enter, and find out what waits. I fought against the anguished wails that surged through me, the shackles of despair threatening to pull me into the abyss once more. With no way back, breathless, I stepped toward the beckoning darkness of the door, mind racing with the implications of my leap into the unknown. The truth burrowed deep, waiting for the moment of reckoning, and as I crossed that threshold, a violent sensation shot through me, illuminating fleeting glimpses of faces long gone lost, grief-stricken, their eyes pleading. With a sickening realization, the door slamming behind me sent shivers down my spine that I had chosen my path. The scent of damp earth and decay enveloped me as I gained my bearings in the narrow chamber. The low light flickered and danced as if reluctant to illuminate the horrors ahead. A cacophony of whispers surged and twisted around me, threading through the darkness like a macabre melody. The voices echoed from all corners, clinging to thoughts I thought I had buried. Why did you come? They taunted, sinister mirth dripping from their words. You're already one of us, a part of our story. My heart thudded as I took a hesitant step forward, the cold stone beneath my feet offering no comfort. The walls crowded closer, adorned with grotesque symbols that writhed in the weak light. My fingers brushed against them, and a jolt coursed through my body at the touch, causing visions to flash before my eyes. I saw them all, the lost souls who had come before me, their faces twisted in a shared agony that threatened to swallow me whole. Did I have to leave? I murmured, battling the rising nausea that twisted my insides. But the chamber vibrated with a dark energy, and a voice deep and echoing responded, there is no leaving. The shadows have claimed you. A chill shot up my spine as I felt an unseen gaze fixate on me, heavy and oppressive. Instinctively, I turned, scanning the dim light for anything threatening. In the corner, two shadowy figures stood intertwined, their shapes pulsating as if alive, their eyes hollow abysses gleaming with an insatiable hunger. They approached slowly, moving together as if compelled by a shared anguish, their skin shimmering like oil on water, reflecting the shimmers of the symbols behind them. Join us, they whispered in unison, their voices weaving around me. Embrace your fate. Every fear you hold it feeds us. I yelled, instinctively backing away. But there was nowhere to go. The chamber was a prison forged in my nightmares, an echo of regrets long hidden. In a sudden frenzy, I stumbled upon a darker corner of the chamber, where the shadows seemed thicker, like a living entity resisting the light. Frantic, I pressed my palm against the wall, searching for any sign of weakness or a lock that could free me. Beneath my palm, the surface pulsed erratically, my heart synchronizing with the thrum of the darkness. In an eruption of shadows, a figure emerged from the void. It was a child, or at least the semblance of a ragged silhouette with wide, pleading eyes that glimmered with confusion and sorrow. Help me, it rasped, its voice like glass breaking, splintering through the haze of whispers. I didn't mean to be here, none of us did. The desperation in its tone layered my fear with a pulse of empathy. I knelt, drawn to its vulnerability. What happened to you? I asked, desperate for answers that could lead me out. Sacrifices, the child whimpered, curling into itself, as if shielding from memories. They demand we were taken. The shadows around the child flickered, yearning toward him like dark tendrils seeking warmth. You have to find the key, only then can you escape. The echoing whispers intensified, drowning out my thoughts, drowning out reason. I found myself captivated by the child's eyes, wanting to pull it from the abyss. I reached out, making contact as I spoke, "You'll find a way," but the moment my fingers touched the child's hand, a surge of energy coursed through me, consuming my thoughts. Waves of forgotten memories crashed over Mephises I had lost, the sound of my own anguish breaking against the jagged rocks of despair. Then the child smelled us sickening, knowing smelly as the air thickened with darkness, wrapping around us like a funeral shroud. Suddenly, a voice thundered from the shadows, drowning out the creeping whispers. Time is slipping. Shadows are hungry. If you seek escape, you must sacrifice that which you hold most dear. My stomach lurched, the echoing intent of that command settling like lead within my heart. The room warped, the air tightening around me, and I felt the weight of those long-lost voices pressing against my chest. The child began to dissolve within my grasp, breaking into swirling mists, and panic gripped me. Tighter than the shadows that encircled this void. I screamed, "No!" And in my denial, my heart pulsed a fierce determination. "Find the key," the fading voice echoed. "Uncover the truth." But as the darkness crushed in, another shape lurked just beyond the wavering edge of light, this one larger, more solid than the child. I turned to see two eerily familiar figures standing side by side, their features warped and grotesque, grinning with malevolent delight. "Join us," they taunted, an unholy chorus of my own bygone choices echoed back at me. "Your darkest fears await," and then the ground beneath me began to tremble, fissures opening like wounds, darkness spiraling into deeper abysses, pulling me toward a void that promised secrets and horrors far greater than I was prepared to face. Overwhelmed with dread, I gasped, "What are you?" The weight of my own shadow whispered back, "You'll find out soon enough." With that chilling proclamation, the floor gave way around me, plunging me into a chasm of darkness far deeper than anything I had encountered yet. My scream was swallowed by the void, leaving only the echo of my fate hanging precariously in the blackness. The whispers vanished, leaving a heavy silence, and in that void, I realized I was not alone. Something was waiting with open arms, lurking just beyond the frayed edges of my sanity. The shadow beckoned, and I was about to discover if I would fight it or become one with it, if I would seize the key or become yet another lost soul in this abyss, whether it was salvation or doom. I had to know which awaited me next. The darkness enclosed me, its embrace chillier than the air above. I felt the ground slip away, but I kept falling through layers of obscurity, each deeper than the last. The sensation was disorienting, like skimming over treacherous waters with no idea of what lurked below. Then, suddenly, as if fate itself had intervened, I landed on something solid. The surface beneath me felt wrong, bumpy and alive, like it was breathing. I scrambled upright, squinting into the shadows that gnawed greedily at the thin ribbon of light above me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I tasted metal in my mouth, a metallic echo of fear and unease. The ground muttered in a low growl as I took a shaky step forward. The darkness swirled like hungry smoke, but I couldn't turn back. I could hear distant sounds that resembled sobbing voices caught in the throes of despair, crying for help yet trapped in a silent scream. They resonated through the chasm and piled upon my chest, sinking me deeper into dread. Had they been siphoned from the same anguish that devoured the child? I could feel the sticky tendrils of despair wrapping around my ankles, snaking their way upward with each hesitant step I took. Then, through the pulsing shadows, an eerie glow began to materialize in the distancia, strange, muted light that flickered like a dying star. Compelled forward by an unseen force, I crept cautiously toward it. As I drew closer, the glow revealed grotesque silhouettes entangled in twisted submission, their bodies contorted around a large stone altar, splattered with crimson stains. The altar pulsated, almost with a heartbeat, making the air crackle with tension. In this horrifying tableau, the moans transformed into a sorrowful symphony, each note centered around the altar, calling for release. Beside the altar, I caught sight of a twisted figure hunched over, gnashing the flesh of a bone with desperate fervor. Its jaw cracked and creaked like the old hinges of a forgotten door as it looked up, revealing hollow, sunken eyes that echoed a world of pain. "You should not have come," it rasped, the severity of its voice slicing through the air like a knife. "The cost is more than you know." I tried to back away, my instincts screaming at me to flee. But behind me loomed an ethereal mist that teased my resolve, pulling me relentlessly toward the altar. I wrestled with my screams, stuffing them deep inside to avoid drawing the attention of the hungry watchers that surrounded me. "What do you want?" I managed to stammer, my voice cracking under the weight of inevitable despair. The creature at the altar grinning a choppy, broken-toothed smile that did nothing to reassure me. "Your sins must be measured," it crooned, torn flesh glistening under the ghostly light. "Only then will the shadows find their due." Fear surged like wildfire through my veins. I turned back toward the glow, desperate for escape, desperate for answers, when suddenly a shrill scream shattered the delicate fabric of dusk. I spun to face the altar, my breath catching in my throat. Smooth white bones lay scattered, partially buried in dark, congealed remnants of their own owners. A figure surged from the darkness, struggling against the weight of the shadows. Another voice caught up in the madness. "Help me!" it shrieked, eyes wide with terror. The pitiful sight drew my heart, though instinct warned me of a terrible deception. "There's no hope. You must feed the darkness." The creature rasped, its claws scratching against the stone. The shadows thickened, entwining around the figure, devouring the last remnants of will, draining it quickly as though ensuring my eyes would witness the finality. "This is the price." The creature roared, rising to its full height, shadow dripping off its limbs like venomous tears. Surrender to despair or end like them. Lurching backward, I stumbled against the altar and recoiled, my mind aflame with disarray. There had to be a way. If I could just focus past the cries of the lost and the sinister laughter that crept into my ears like a foul breeze. An instinct tugged at me, a gnawing sense deep within my gut, whispering how I could seize the key to freeing myself, to undoing the corruption that fettered this place, and then I saw a wicked glint among the bone-choked cries, the remnants of something familiar. I was drawn to the glimmer, a key hanging precariously from a broken chain. My heart raced with sudden hope, but the moment I reached for it, the agony of those souls alarmed me, their wailing a cacophony of heartache amplified by my own conflict that a heartbeat echoed, as if the altar itself came alive, yearning for my decision. It became clear, this was no ordinary key, nor that type of salvation I could grasp lightly. I felt the pull toward the grotesque light and the gathering shadows synchronizing with my very thoughts, and with one foot holding on tightly to my past, I was being forced to choose. Your time is now. The creature howled, its shadowy form undulating to the rhythm of my wavering sanity. With the dark whispers entwining my thoughts, I grasped the key in desperation, but the moment I lifted it, I realized it was not just to unlock, but to seal my fate, me past or my future, salvation or obliteration. And suddenly, the chasm trembled violently, sending shards of bone crashing around me. The altar quaked, and everything in that sacrilegious space screamed in a fever of anguish. I was torn between the echoes of the past and the shattering present, a pivotal moment that promised the uncurling of unfathomable dread that I and that whirlwind of chaos. I glanced back at the altar just as the shadows began to twist, forming a vortex of darkness so deep it felt sentient, as if each fragmented spirit pulsed within. I clutched the key tightly, darting one last look back at the figure still caught in its despair. And with a final push of instinct, I hadn't the chance to scream before the abyss swallowed me whole, locking me in a horrific embrace, its whispers of despair laced with the promise of release if only I would abandon all hope. As the void collapsed upon me, swirling shadows engulfed my surroundings, erasing all remaining forms of reality. I plummeted deeper into that endless chasm, a spiraling descent that felt like being pulled through a dark tunnel of madness. The whispers rose again, a symphony of torment that pushed against the fraying edges of my sanity, taunting me with fragments of forgotten memories and bittersweet nostalgia. "You're here for your truth," they sang, eerie and hypnotizing, and then, suddenly, I landed with a jarring thud on solid ground. Blinking, I stared at the pulsating shadows writhing around me, still clinging to me like a blanket of dread. The air felt heavier here, each inhale pulling me deeper into a thick shroud of despair. I was in a desolate landscape cloaked in darkness. The remnants of what could have been lay scattered at my feet like hollow shells that I in the dim light, I could see the silhouette of familiar faces, gazing at me from the edges of the shadows, their eyes locked in a perpetual state of mourning. They weren't just souls lost in the void, they were fragments of my past, people I'd known and loved. Each one bore the weight of a grief that wasn't mine, but somehow felt intimately shared. Their hollow eyes bore into me, silently asking, begging, pleading for me to choose. "Help us." A soft voice echoed, breaking through the din of lost memories. My heart clenched as I recognized the voice of my younger sister, lost years ago to tragedy. The guilt surged through me like a tidal wave of anguish, memories flooding back the day I had been too late, the day I had let go. No. I gasped, eyes darting around to avoid her gaze. "I can't. I don't belong here." But the shadows grew thicker, wrapping around me like icy tendrils of despair, pulling me closer to her fading form. "If you would only set us free," she whispered, her voice intertwining with the cries that enveloped the darkness. "Chose to save us, and you may yet escape." But at that moment, I felt the presence of something else lurking near, a tall and shadowy figure rising as if summoned by the clamor of my internal battle. It loomed with an unsettling familiarity, the shape reflecting everything wrong with me and everything I had ever feared. I felt a sick horror claw at my throat as I realized this was not merely a tormentor, it was my reflection, a ghastly manifestation of my own cowardice and regrets, both comforting and terrifying. "The choice is yours," it growled, shadows coiling around its form as it stepped closer, the ambience thickening with echoes of pain. "Save yourself or them. But understand this: the cost is far greater than your comprehension. No. I cried, shaking my head violently as the shadows clawed into my skin, drawing me back toward that altar of despair. My chest tightened as I grasped the key around my neck, its weight a lullaby against my heart. As adrenaline surged, I turned toward the altar, the terrible truth dawning upon me. The key holds power, I realized, but not just for escape. It wasn't merely a way out, it was a vessel of my choice. If I were to unlock this place, I had to confront everything that chained me here, the losses, the betrayals, and the guilt that shadowed my every step. But would I risk my life or their souls? Embrace the darkness, and they may yet return, the entity hissed, the shadows snarling in agreement. Every ounce of logic condensed into a dreadful moment, each whisper urging me to lean toward despair. Gritting my teeth, I resisted their pull, feeling the strength of chains binding me less like a prison, more like an opportunity. No more. My voice roared against the cacophony of torment, and I thrust my hand forward, clutching the key tightly as I took a leap of faith toward the altar. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as I neared the looming tombstone-like structure, its surface gleaming with echoes of my past. I slammed the key into the lock at its heart and twisted not for treasure or gain, but to honor those I'd lost. As the key turned, the very air exploded with blinding light, illuminating the darkness and bursting the veil that I felt as though time itself fractured. With the key finally turning, memories rushed through the air, swirling around me like a cyclone, each one grasping at my essence, pain, loss, joy, and love. I saw my sister smile, her laughter echoing against my heart. The lost souls joined in a melodic harmony that rose above the darkness, climbing higher and higher until the void began to tremble. The shadows shrieked, twisting violently as they lost their grip, and suddenly I was enveloped in brilliant white light. And just like that, everything fell silent. When my vision cleared, I found myself standing in the gas station once more, the flickering lights above reminding me of the fragile truth. Everything I had faced was real, but the greatest horror was that I had the choice. I had freed those souls, but somewhere deep within me, a different part of the darkness lingered, coaxing me toward despair. Did I turn and looked back through the front window, and though the light surrounded me, I saw the shadows swirling just beyond, waiting, lusting for my return. And I knew then that while I had unlocked the past, I had only merely postponed my reckoning. There would always be something left to haunt my steps, something that lingered like a whisper in the air, relentless and cunning. And as I stepped outside into the cool, crisp night, the gas station door swung open once more, a familiar echo of the laughter I could never quite reach. Chills crawled up my spine as I gripped my keys, my heart pounding, locked between fate and freedom, knowing that the shadows of my choices, they would always be there, lurking just behind the glimmering light, because I was free but not unscathed. The door to that gas station would remain open, both a barrier and a promise of what still lay beyond. Come back to us, they whispered in the wind, and beneath my skin, I felt the darkness pulse, waiting for the moment I would yield once more. And despite my escape, I knew the shadows echoed a chilling truth in my mind. Sometimes, the darkest places live within us.